Welcome to Move the Chains with Jonathan Rivers. Here's your host, Jonathan Rivers.
Let there be football. Welcome into Move the Chains. I'm your host and your boy, Jonathan Bam Rivers. I got to take a breath because I was completely shocked by what I saw in the Super Bowl last weekend. And a lot doesn't shock me when it comes to football, but that did. So I'm going to give you my full reaction and why the team that's holding the Lombardi Trophy can hold many more in the future and why the team that lost is not going anywhere. I'm also going to answer your questions via social media. I'm going to talk about a couple of head coaches and where they stand and why I think one had to go through the mud to get to the top of the mountain and why it's going to be pretty for him sitting there for a while. And also, man, in my nonsense narrative, the GOAT debate is always ongoing. And I'm going to tell you why the debate itself is not the issue, but the way the debate is being done is the issue. And last but not least, I think football at a high level is built on one principle. And I'm going to tell you what that is so you don't want to miss it. All that and more right here on Move the Chains, but you know how we do it. Let's kick it off at first down. All right, so one of my favorite movies is Troy. If you've never seen it, it's Eric Bana's in it, Brad Pitt's in it, and it's about the Greeks trying to conquer the Trojans. And in that movie, Brad Pitt's character, Achilles, is going to end up fighting Hector, the leader of the Trojan army. He's one of the greatest warriors of all time, and Achilles in Greek mythology was presumed the greatest warrior of all time. And I remember when they were having their battle, their one-on-one battle right outside the walls of Troy, and Hector fell over a stone. And Achilles didn't touch him. He said, "Get up, Prince of Troy. I won't let a stone take my glory." And what he meant was, I'm not going to beat you because you were at less than 100%. I'm going to make sure that you're at full throttle so nobody thinks me beating you is an accident. The Philadelphia Eagles wanted to make sure that a stone didn't take their glory. And I'm going to tell you what, there was no fluke, there was no issue, there were no officials, there were no accidents in this game. The Philadelphia Eagles strictly manhandled the Kansas City Chiefs. And I'm going to tell you this as we pull up this graphic with the stats from the game. I was completely wrong about the Super Bowl and completely right about the Super Bowl MVP because they're not mutually exclusive. Ernest, my director, always talks about, every football game tells a story. And if you were to go back and read the synopsis of a game by looking at the box score, you can then predict, if you don't know who won, who might have won sometimes. In this case, the prediction would have been easy because you saw the 3 and the 1. You saw the 3 turnovers for Kansas City that also led to 21 points? And then you saw the 1 turnover for the Eagles that didn't lead to any points. And that was the story of the game. Now, we can talk about how dominant the Eagles were defensively, but we knew that coming in, which is why I'm not going to run for making this pick because I knew what the Kansas City Chiefs were, and I knew what the Philadelphia Eagles were. There were no surprises in this game in terms of what each team was, but I'm going to tell you what 2 things really surprised me. One, the Philadelphia Eagles made the Kansas City Chiefs look unprepared. And that's not something that I think I can ever say that I've seen under Andy Reid. The Chiefs looked unprepared because we know how great the Kansas City Chiefs have been under Andy Reid and with Patrick Mahomes and especially Steve Spagnuolo defensively off a bye week. And remember, that's what the Super Bowl is. You got 2 weeks to prepare. So a Super Bowl is essentially a double bye week. So all that time they had to prepare, but it didn't matter. But the Philadelphia Eagles also made the Kansas City Chiefs look old. And by old, I mean the Kansas City Chiefs hadn't been explosive all year. So I'm not worried about them not being explosive, even though there were some explosive plays throughout the game, but they were more late. Kansas City had been efficient. Philadelphia made them look erratic. And that's what I have to say. So if I sit here, guys, and just focus on the game, because I could give so much props to so many different people from the Philadelphia Eagles. But I want to kind of look at things and go back and have a little revisionist history. Because I think in order to really put into proper perspective what the Philadelphia Eagles have done this year, you have to go back to last year. Do you remember last year when they got off to, 10-1, 11-1 start, and Jalen Hurts was being very transparent as the leader that he is, and he was saying there's just something not right with us. Now, I don't know what it was. I think they had a team full of leaders, but for some reason, there was an issue. There were some cracks. There were some things that weren't solidified in terms of the structure and foundation of the Philadelphia Eagles, and then it manifested itself into them losing, maybe 6 of their last 7 or what have you, and then getting bounced in the first round against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And the only thing I can remember is how everybody questioned Nick Sirianni, how everybody questioned Jalen Hurts. And I don't mind you saying that they're losing, they're having some problems, but then you started questioning the character and their leadership because they weren't winning football games. Now, if it comes out that there were questions about people's character, then I'm all for it. But why do I bring that up? Not just because they won the Super Bowl, which means that they obviously were able to grow from that. And I told you that the Super Bowl MVP, Jalen Hurts, was one of the most underrated and underappreciated people in the NFL. Yeah, I can pick the Chiefs and still think he's a dog, which is exactly what happened. But I want to go back to Jacksonville. Why am I bringing up the Jacksonville Jaguars, talking about the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles? Because in the same season that the Eagles started 10 or 11-1 and then kind of faltered towards the end of the season and made the playoffs and lost in the first round of the wild card, the Jacksonville Jaguars were 6-2 to start the 2023 season. And they ended the season 3-6. And now the 2024 season of the Jacksonville Jaguars was a complete mess. The quarterback got hurt. He's underachieved as the number 1 overall pick. And the quote-unquote quarterback whisperer, Doug Peterson, no longer has a job in Jacksonville. They no longer have the same GM. They've completely removed everybody from that organization and trying to build around the quarterback who I think is struggling mentally in addition to physically in Jacksonville. So doesn't that make you look at the Philadelphia Eagles a little bit differently? Doesn't it make you think that, hey, what they went through, that there was an upside to adversity? What they went through is that growing pains have to happen. What they went through is that leadership and talent rises to the top. What they showed you is that even in the midst of them not being their best selves last year, and with some of the issues this year that everybody wanted to make light of, they showed themselves to be the best team in the NFL. And that man right there was being harassed all day. And I want you to go back to the Super Bowl against Tampa Bay and the Super Bowl against Philadelphia. If you're a football fan and you watch those games, if you're a GM and you watch those games, and you're unsure about how to build a football team, I'm going to remind you, it always starts up front. All right, when we come back from the break, it'll be social media questions answered right here by your boy. Back when we'll move the chains, right after this. And welcome back to the show. And before we get to your social media questions, as always, I want to take this opportunity to thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for hosting Move the Chains. Blessing, one of the biggest blessings of my life, and I'm very appreciative that I'm able to be here every day to be able to record this show. Secondly, I want to thank you, the fans. I actually ran into a fan, Joseph. Just met him, great guy. Met him at an appointment that I had earlier on in the week, and he came up and spoke to me and said he enjoyed the show. So shout out to Mr. Joseph for watching Move the Chains. And as always, man, shout out to the best production crew, the best YouTube crew, the best social media crew in the business. When I'm telling you the ideas that flow from the mouths of these individuals, man, that help this show grow and build upon the greatness that it is, I'm very excited about it. So shout out to the best production crew, best social media crew, best YouTube crew in the business. Having said all that, you know what time it is. It's time for Second Down. All right, so we're heading into the offseason here, and you know I'm going to have a lot of content to discuss for college and the pro football here. But right now, you love when I answer questions, so I want to go ahead and go it. So what's the first question we have, Ernest? All right, how good of a coach is Nick Sirianni? See, this is where I want to say that if you want to say Nick Sirianni is a good coach now because he's won a Super Bowl, that's fine. All I'm saying is I'm somebody who likes to look at the totality of an individual and their performance. Because if Nick Sirianni hadn't won the Super Bowl last weekend, he still would have been a good coach. Some people may call him a great coach now, which is fine. But do you know the record of Nick Sirianni? Do you know that this is the second time he's been to the Super Bowl with the Philadelphia Eagles? See, the reason people question Nick Sirianni, in my estimation, is because they see as awkward. Right? They deem some of his attributes unacceptable. Now, I'm not somebody who agrees with you yelling at the fans and stuff like that, but man, that's who that dude is. So what I'm telling you is this is the biggest reason that Nick Sirianni is better than a good coach, right? Because do you remember Brandon Staley, head coach of the Chargers? Do you remember all the fourth down risks he took? And do you remember all the bad decision-making that he had in games? And he was the head coach when the Chargers lost an almost seemingly insurmountable lead to the Jacksonville Jaguars in the playoffs a couple of years ago. Brandon Staley ultimately lost his job because he wasn't a good manager of the game and he wasn't a good decision-maker. That used to be Nick Sirianni. And I used to question Nick Sirianni the same way I questioned Dan Campbell, right? I used to say that sometimes you take risk and there's being aggressive, but sometimes there's being irresponsible as a head coach. Did you watch the Eagles this year? How irresponsible was Nick Sirianni? Did you watch the Super Bowl? This man was taking points because he knew what his defense was doing. Because when you're a good coach and now you understand the game flow, you understand complementary football a little bit better, and that's what Nick Sirianni did. So the fact that he stopped being Brandon Staley makes him a phenomenal coach in its own right because he adjusted. Plus, he also listened to his team when they said they wanted to run the football earlier on in the season, and that's what they did. So again, for everybody that kept getting upset that they weren't throwing the ball for 400 yards, Understand the team's identity. They understood their identity. Nick Sirianni understands their identity, and that's why they're holding the Lombardi Trophy after winning Super Bowl 59. All right, what's my next question? Is Kellen Moore a good fit as a head coach for the Saints? Let me tell you something. Kellen Moore doesn't even need to worry about being a head coach right now. He needs to be the head cleaner, and this is what I mean by that. Do you know that they're 32nd in terms of salary cap space? 32nd, right? So you do know, if you don't know, I'm going to tell you the salary cap is the allotted amount of money that each team has to spend in terms of, or is allowed to spend on its roster in any given season. Now, the collective bargaining agreement will always increase the salary cap, and it gives these players an opportunity to make more money, which is fine, but you have to be a strategist in this. He has to be able to clean up that mess that Sean Payton and the organization left him coming into this job. Secondly, do you know that they're number one in dead cap money? That means that's money that's being paid to people who aren't even on your roster or not playing right now. So the Saints really don't have a lot of wiggle room, and this is Kellen Moore's first opportunity as a head coach. He also has to hire a defensive coordinator, has to hire an offensive coordinator, and he's got to fill out a staff. So to me, is he a good fit? I need to know, is he a good cleaner first? Because Kellen Moore is not in a position to be a good head coach yet. If he comes and the Saints look better and they're competing for a playoff spot, that in my mind will make me feel like he's accomplished something in his first year. But I'm going to tell you what, the same way I think I should give college coaches 3 or 4 years, even in the transfer portal world, to recruit and develop and build a program, I'm going to give this man the same. I don't know if it'll last that long if he doesn't perform, but I'm going to give him the same because he has a lot of cleaning up to do before he can even consider becoming a great coach in my estimation. All right, that's my last question. Were the Chiefs overrated in 2024? Heck no. Why would you say they're overrated? Because they got blasted in the Super Bowl? We know they got blasted in the Super Bowl by a better team, but for you to sit here and say the Chiefs were overrated means, one, you're just a hater on the Chiefs, or two, maybe you don't understand football. Because you know what really kind of makes me laugh? When you yell people are overrated and at the same time celebrate beating those people. Well, if they're overrated, why would you celebrate beating somebody whom you think is not that good anyway? The Chiefs, for the last 7 years, and I'll do the last 3 specifically because they won 2 of the last 3 Super Bowls, were the best team in football. Now, they've got a lot of decision-making to do as well regarding free agency. Trey Smith, who's one of the best guards in football, is going to be one of their biggest free agents. And they've got a plethora of people that they need to decide on whether or not they're going to be coming back. And I'm going to be talking about this in further weeks. But to answer your question, no, they weren't overrated. They were a phenomenal team. They have a phenomenal defense. They have a phenomenal head coach with a phenomenal quarterback, and they were phenomenal in one-score games. The problem is Philadelphia made sure that the Super Bowl was nowhere near being a one-score game, and it bared out that way. So again, I know we like to make huge pronouncements about singular situations and then allow them to dictate how we feel big picture. I don't do those things. I can take one piece of data, put it in with the rest of the data that I have, and then form some type of opinion based on all of the information that I have. But it's rare that I'm going to let one singular incident dictate my entire thought process when it comes to a team, a player, or a coach. All right, when we come back from the break, everybody wants to talk about the GOAT because I think it's the hot conversation to have. And I don't mind if you have the debate. I just mind it the way the debate is structured because the narrative, some ways, is complete nonsense. And I'll tell you what I mean right after the break. Back when we move the chains, right after this. And we're back into the show. So listen, I've broken down the Super Bowl, which was a complete atrocity if you're a Kansas City Chiefs fan, and elation if you're the Eagles fans. And we answered some questions here on social media. But my favorite segment of the show is upon us. So let's not delay any longer, man. Let's hit it, Ernest. It's time for Monastir's Narrative. All right. Brady versus Mahomes. Mahomes versus Brady. This GOAT debate. So my director Ernest told me that Stephen A. Smith made a comment about now Montana being back in the GOAT conversation because this game was lost by the Chiefs. And I ask you, well, if he's back in the conversation, in your mind, why was he out of the conversation in the first place? But I don't understand it because, you know, I understand Mahomes could have won 4 and didn't win 4, but now in his 8th year, the Chiefs, under his tutelage and under his leadership, have won 3 Super Bowls, back-to-back Super Bowls in 3 of the last 6. So I think Montana's one of the greatest of all time, 4-0 in Super Bowls. Like when I tell you he was phenomenal in the playoffs, he was good in the regular season, even better. And I think that's what makes the greats. They're great in the regular season, and then they're not just greater in the playoffs, but they sustain that greatness for a long period of time. And this is why I have a problem with people, one, saying that Tom Brady's not the GOAT because to me, he's the greatest quarterback accomplished-wise of all time. He's not the most talented physically, but that doesn't matter. Stop always trying to equate talent with accomplishments and opportunities that you've created for yourself. And I think Mahomes is the best quarterback by far in the league right now, and I think he's one of the top 5 of all time if he retired today, if not top 2 or 3. But it does Tom Brady and guys like Joe Montana a disservice to say Mahomes is the GOAT right now because they haven't had the career. He hasn't had the career that they've had in terms of the amount of time and the accolades that they've had. And it does Patrick Mahomes a disservice because you're not giving him time to accrue the amount of opportunities that they've had. There are not always apples to apples, man. He's been in the league 8 years and started 7. Now, I will say there's been no start to a career like Patrick Mahomes. His first 7 years, most passing yards, most touchdowns. He's already second for all-time playoff wins in only 7 years as a starter. So what I'm saying is if you're going to have the debate, have it the right way and have it in perspective. This is not just in a vacuum. Patrick Mahomes is not the greatest quarterback of all time yet. Could he get there? Absolutely. But even if he doesn't, Joe Montana, Patrick Mahomes, and Tom Brady have all had phenomenal careers, and I'm okay with saying that, as you should be. All right, when we come back from the break, it'll be the final drive. And I'm going to tell you what football is based on. You want to know what it is? Come back with your boy. Back and we'll move the chains right after this. Welcome back to Move the Chains, and it's the final segment of the show, so you know what that means. It's time for the final drive. Scheme is great, speed is great, knowledge is great, game management is great. All that stuff matters in winning in this league. But man, football, especially the NFL, is built on physicality. If you are not physical at the point of attack, I don't care what you do, right? You control the line of scrimmage, it doesn't matter what else happens. You may not win every game, but because you're physical, you put yourself in position to win every game because football is a game of attrition, and it is a war of attrition. And at the end of the day, if you're more physical than your opponent over the duration of a 4-quarter opportunity, you will more often than not come out on top because that's just the way the game is built. All right, don't forget, you can not only catch Move the Chains on the Sports Leader, WXTX, Fox 54, you can also catch us on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. It's at Move_the_Chains, or just go to Move the Chains, type in Jonathan Rivers. It'll pull up, subscribe, like, leave a comment. As always, we're here for it. All right, for the best production crew in the business, I'm your boy, Jonathan Bam Rivers. This has been another banger, and just because the seasons are over in NFL and college doesn't mean we're done. Back with more next week, right here on Move the Chains. And as always, God bless.